Good evening. You are listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight, I have RDV. Tonight, we are discussing all things pumpkin with perhaps one of the singular best pieces of holiday material that one could conjure up, and that'd be, of course, It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, a personal favorite of mine. RDV, when we were talking backstage just now, I did not realize that this is really only like maybe your second or third watch. Talk to me
Mhm.
about that. That seems unusual. I
I wa-
figured most people had seen Charlie Brown.
I watched the Christmas one. That was always my favorite. So I would remember watching that one all as a kid. This one I might have watched this when I was like 3 or 4 years old. And that was around like 88, 87, or around there. Yeah, 87 to 88. And wow, it's just like it's been a while since I've seen it. And I remember like the parts of like, but I didn't remember the trick or treating stuff. I know he's brought up a couple years, could just go because Engeltine is a friend of ours. He loves this. He always brings up the rock gag in this,
Yeah.
the jokes. But all I remember is Linus going to a pumpkin patch and just sitting there. And I remember like what's her name? Charlie Brown's younger sister, Sally, going over there, and like that was it. I don't remember anything else from this. So it was like a fresh watch for me, which is really cool because I still enjoyed it.
Yeah, so I had gotten a high def version. You've got the DVD that had a
Yeah,
bunch of few featurettes, and I think
yeah,
again, you being the 30 something and Professor Pixel being the young millennial 20 something, the interesting thing is that the realization that there's Snoopy's been around and Charlie Brown and a whole lot since about 1950, and they started doing shows.
mhm.
That there was even a cartoon thing in the 80s. There's the movie about 5, 6 years ago, which I thought was done very well. There's this timeless quality that Charlie Brown always seems to have with its characters. That's something I kind of wanted to jump in now because Halloween, we know over the years has gotten much maligned
Yeah.
for reasons we're not going to bother getting into. But growing up as a kid, it always symbolized for me growing up here in Central Florida, just west of Orlando, Florida, in the Pine Hills Palace, where Daisy and Max, my German shepherds, patrol the grounds and keep it clean of any wrongdoers. The idea is that you could really dress up a lot, get a lot of candy. It was a lot of fun. It was a big deal. And I know people do it today, but it seems more about the spectacle of putting the lights out and almost Christmasifying it. And at least in the neighborhoods I go to on Halloween or the parties that I go to, it seems to be more of that rather than kids dressing up, even though
Hmm.
there's a bit of that. Where you're at in the great state of Wisconsin, what's it like for Halloween currently?
Well, it's always cold in October. Remember, in October.
Yeah,
So
we hope it breaks 80 degrees down here when we're going out. So
I
yeah,
hope, I hope it breaks 60 or at least 50, and it's not raining. It always rains around. Either we get rain, our last bit of rain, or we get snow like beginning of October. But I remember trick or treating, I always have a jacket on
yep.
because it's yeah. And now because we're in fall, because everything it gets darker quicker here. It's also gets same thing. Get you have the more because we haven't switched back. You usually
Mhm.
fall back to fall or spring ahead. So it's so I always remember going trick or treating it and they'd have it they'd always have it on a Saturday or a Sunday. It's always a Sunday, whether it's on Halloween or not, because because they don't want to do this during the day or Mondays or Tuesdays. So that was a school week. So
Mhm.
I remember going all the time, going up to go trick or treating here, and it's always just be cold and rainy, and that's what made it so miserable. It's just like okay, but at least the candy was good. I never got a rock. I did get the Bible memos, or
Yep.
like, no, where's the candy, lady? It's like, or you get the pennies. What is the obsession with the pennies?
Some people used to, say you find a penny, heads up, it's good luck. So some people would give that, and once in a while, if you got like an Indian head one, it might be worth something. And the idea of I've actually, but one
Yeah.
year, believe it or not, in addition to coins, got stamps. Because stamp collecting is a thing. It's not as much of
Mhm.
a thing as it was before, but it also was a pastime that had a lot more popularity
Oh
to it, or at
yeah,
least a market.
it's not as popular now as it is, but I'm sure it's still popular. It's just not talked about. There are people because I go to the post office and they do sell collector stamps. You know,
Yes, yes.
you can even new stuff like Star Wars stuff, even some of the newer stuff. Dune. I'm sure they're gonna have stamp collections featuring the Dune. Characters. Any movies are coming out. The Marvel stamps.
That would have been a wise tie-in. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they have those right now. But anyway, yeah, I always get the freaking coins. I'm thinking like I'm like 4 or 5 at the time when I was I remember I always get the freaking. It's like that, and then you here's the toothbrush. I'm like, oh, thank you, Mr. Dentist. I'm gonna go chug a bottle of soda. Screw you. it's like the toothbrush. I don't want a toothbrush, But yeah, the other thing is I remember growing up, like other than going trick or treating, is like before that is that you'd watch the horror movies, or just watch any movies when you always have like the people around bombing for apples, and then they have the razor blades. So that was a big thing too, because that always played to me whenever I got an apple from somebody. I'm like, oh, you keep the apple.
Yeah, I think with Halloween, like you say, talking about how it's changed over the years.
Yeah,
I always wondered, looking at animated cartoon characters. If you grow out of cartoons and as an adult, we definitely watch some when we're kids and we get older. It brings us back. But Peanuts is timeless to me.
Yeah, I still watch Real Ghostbusters. That has a Halloween, special and stuff. Back then, so Halloween specials for cartoons were always a big thing. Peanuts, I believe, started that trend. As far as this is from 1966, I'm maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe it was months before this, or maybe around this area. But this is the first, Charlie Brown. I remember, or anything that had Halloween for a cartoon.
Yeah, and at the time in the 60s, while westerns are really popular too, predictive programming and having something on religiously every week after week, was something that was starting to get people kind of primed for things. And so showing, say, the 10 Commandments during Easter constantly every year was a thing. And that sometimes that was the only way to watch an old blockbuster, or in this case here, a classic movie. And we've talked about before with Christmas themes about how certain movies are played and how they may not have been done very well, but because they were associated with Christmas and put every year, it was like that. And I think, unfortunately, with Snoopy, while he's changed over the past 10 to 20 years, he was just a constant on all your major holidays, not just Halloween, but of course Thanksgiving and Christmas with the two that we've talked about, but also stuff in the spring and in the summer. And over the decades, they would put stuff in, and they wouldn't, I think, oversaturate the market. But for Halloween, it's hard to sit there and say, well, what's the one thing you could always sit down and watch every year? And for me, what makes me think of Halloween is this movie, because it's not really goofy. The thing about Peanuts that everybody always likes is that the characters are like really basic versions of adults with their own specific personalities. And as you get older, you're able to kind of shift your frame of mind from being a kid to being an adult and still see them, and you know who they are, but now you see them differently. I think that's one of the reasons why it's had a long history of success.
My oldest sibling, she was 5 years old when this came out. She's 47 now. So, and she really, my mom was telling me she was really into this stuff, and because I was watching this, there are some adult jokes in here.
Yes.
That as a kid you really wouldn't pick up on. It's not, and that's not. And when I say adult jokes, I don't mean like perverted or anything like that. No. Lucy, when she's like, because she's like, here, kick the football. And he's like, I'm not going to think of it. I'm stupid. You're going to pull it out last minute. I'm going to kill myself. That's something you would not see on anything cartoons at all today. The words kill. You don't hear that at all. So when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, they actually said that back then. And she says, like, don't worry, I got this contract, or it is signed, note here, says I won't do it,
Right.
And he's like, oh, this is kind of valid, and it does it. And she pulls the last minute. And then when she's sitting there on the ground, just like kind of like laying there, she says, oh, the funny thing about contracts and these all, they're like, this wasn't notarized.
Right. As a kid, you have no idea what the heck you're talking about.
Yeah, freaking notarized. What the heck? You laugh at the fact that she still got him and he still passed out, and poor Charlie Brown is like the butt of the joke of this whole entire series. At least this
Charlie Brown.
Oh, so it's like there's a scene in there where this is they're so rude to him. Like first she says he comes up to you, he's like, Lucy, look, I got to invite to a volunteer party. He's like, let me see. He's like, oh yeah, you're supposed to be on there's a list of people who are allowed to come and people who are not supposed to come. This must be a mistake. And he kind of gets angry. And then later on, they need someone to model so they can because they want to draw the face on the jack o' lantern. They turn him around and they draw on his back of his head. This poor kid. This kid's bald.
Yeah.
He's the butt of the joke. So the whole gag, there's a gag here, which I just start cracking up because I forgot about this. And this is the rock gig, where they go trick-or-treating, he's like, what do you get? Like, I got candy bar, I got liquor, I got a rock. And then it keeps, and then every house they go to, he gets a rock.
Yeah, and it's a gag, but there's a part of you that thinks, oh, certain people get certain gifts, and
Yeah.
it makes you almost think of like when kids are growing up, how like the really pretty ones get all the extra attentions, or the really athletic ones, and
Yeah.
the ones that are like that, and it's that whole branding thing that we do go through growing up that people want to ignore, and just kind of going through some of the scenes, starting off here at the beginning. You're right, there's a lot of these adult things. The first scene is Lucy and Linus going out and getting the big pumpkin, and he, of course,
Oh,
and this is such an adult thing. She makes him carry it,
yes.
and he figures it out. But then she gets a knife to start cutting it up, and yeah, she's a little girl, but the fact that it's just two of them, no adults around, and you almost never see adults of any kind, except for the womp womp womp
There's a
sound.
scene. There's a scene where there's a scene
that's
though before that though when they're carrying it to the place. He's carrying it, and then it comes to a fence. He whacks into himself in the hole in the fence. So then you see him rolls around. He's like, "Oh, this is cool, I'm rolling around." And all of a sudden, he gets a quick stop. Otherwise, he's gonna run over Lucy. He grabs onto it, and he's getting dragged. And then she looks at him like, "What are you doing? Quit fooling around." I'm thinking like, poor Linus, like but like there is some funny humor in this. I was just laughing. I didn't know what to expect. It's been a while since I watched this. I've seen the Charlie Brown one, which is more of a serious one than a comedy. There are some situational humor.
Mm-hmm.
This had a lot of comedy in it. I noticed. So I'm still going through. I've never really watched the Thanksgiving episode. I've only ever seen the Christmas one because that's the one I remember always watching over again because I liked it.
Right.
The whole story, the music, and everything. So there's a scene in here at the Halloween party. You see, what's his name is the blonde Schroeder, I think it is. He's playing the piano
player.
He's playing a happy song, and Snoopy's there, and he's all kind of like happy, and then he starts playing the sad song, and then Snoopy starts to cry. It's just like out of nowhere, and then and all of a sudden he starts howling. He's like, because he doesn't he never acts like a dog. Really, he always acts like a person. So when he finally howled, he quick covers on. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, I want to talk about the whole Snoopy thing. The whole he's dressed up as a World War I pilot.
Yes.
Which has nothing to do with Halloween at all.
The Great Baron.
And he's going to and then because Charlie Brown is asked by them while they're tricking. He's like, "Where's your dog of yours?" He's like, "Oh, he's setting up his thing. He's gonna go take on the Great Red Baron." And this is where you get kind of like a little bit of history lesson and kind of like this. And it's kind of cool because Snoopy is the one. For those kids who have imaginations, you can identify with him. He gets up on top of his little doghouse, and he takes off. It's at contact. He starts flying, and then he's in a dogfight, and you see him just shooting them, and then you see him he gets kind of maniacal, evil. It's like you see a big explosion and a flash of red. He's like, I shot him down, but then they start chasing him, and and you actually see the bullets come towards him. And it's just I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, and I kept thinking like, what does this have to do with Halloween? But
it's the Snoopy. The thing with Snoopy is, and I think it's really popular, is that sometimes it almost seemed like he got to be so popular, such a cool character, that he stood out more than the others.
Yeah.
And I think it's for two reasons. One, he is interesting. He's obviously, besides Woodstock, non-human. We know Woodstock is his buddy, but we know he belongs to Charlie Brown. So I think what a lot of the episodes in the comic strips would, of course, show you is that everything, of course, is supposed to, be in Charlie Brown's universe. And to me, none of these characters are supposed to go above it. But there were times in the strip and sometimes in these things where they gave Snoopy, because he was so popular in a dog, and dog is man's best friend, that they really wanted to emphasize it, give him a little something more to do. Plus, maybe fill in some time, maybe they didn't have much more. And I'm okay with that. I think the problem with it is that if he becomes too popular or more popular than Charlie Brown is more interesting, you're not putting over your main character, which in this case is Charlie Brown.
So he becomes a Snoopy show.
But what you said about him, I think, is really great because, like Linus is really the baby of the group, and he still believes, and, he's writing letters and stuff, and he's very honest to heart. And that's one reason why Lucy calls him a sweet babu and loves him and wants to be out there with him. She's attracted to that. She gets pissed at him, but she knows he cares. I think with Snoopy, it's,
it wasn't Lucy, it was Sally.
Or Sally, excuse me.
Yeah, Lucy's older sister.
No, I'm looking at Lucy right now.
I know.
Because Lucy's a piece of work. I will get her in a minute. But Snoopy, he's for kids that really can dive into stuff, that's what Snoopy does. He's creative, he's imaginative, he's almost like the adult in the group in that he's just so good and he does his own thing. I think he's like the big brother everybody wants to look up
Yeah,
to here, you know?
I kind of think about now is that the whole point of Snoopy's thing is that kids, when you put on a costume, Halloween, you want to pretend to be that person. Kids dress as superheroes, so you run around as Batman, or Superman, and you play and you interact, and stuff. I think that's the whole point of his segment, even though they don't really say that. But as an adult, I kind of look at that now and I'm not thinking about it. That's probably what it was, even though it's a loosely, I guess.
Yeah.
It's basically left up to your own interpretation of what it is. Like you said, it could just be filler, or it could actually have a point. It's different to whoever watches it, which is kind of cool. What was the other thing? Linus, when he's writing to "Dear the Great Pumpkin," it's like, and he's like
proper. Back in the day, people wrote letters.
Yeah, and now remember, this is before the I think this is after the great this is the Charlie Brown Christmas is first, right?
I believe so, and then this was the year after. 66, I think.
Yeah. 67, I think is for this one, but he's writing to basically would be Santa Claus, but it's a great pumpkin though, and everybody keeps making fun of him. It's like, and then finally, you see Snoopy walks up to him, he starts. The greetings starts laughing. He just can't hold it in. He just starts busting over laughing as he walks away. It's just like, I'm like, oh my gosh! It's like, and then Snoopy's laugh is contagious. I can see why people love him more because he said he was like the funny part of the show. And you brought up Woodstock, which is interesting because Woodstock's not in this whatsoever.
Yeah, I know, and so maybe they just. Again, somewhat newer characters, at least for how we're going to present them visually.
There's no Peppermint Patty either.
Yeah. And there's some characters like Pigpen's in here, but it's
how do you know it's me? Is it a cloud over the ghost?
I mean, and another thing too is it's like everybody's got, like I say, that one bit of personality. And I want to talk about Lucy a little bit because she's the hard ass, she's the queen bee, and we all know somebody like that. There is somebody always like that. She is the one that likes to dominate a situation. She's in charge. She was the one, of course, always gave out for 5 cents her advice and all that too.
She's the smart one of the group. She's the adult.
Yeah. I always thought it was interesting with her and how Charlie Brown kept continuing to try to, damn it, I got to keep trying to kick that football. He's not going to give up too. It's different than, some other things we've seen in some of the other episodes that they have too. But yeah, to me, the Snoopy thing is interesting. I think the colors in here are really nice. It has
the leaves
really worn.
The leaves
it definitely looks like fall to me.
Yeah. Charlie Brown's, he just raked up a giant pile and you see Snoopy sees a leaf. He keeps blowing air. He keeps blowing until it finally lands on top of the pile. And Charlie Brown's like, "Thanks, buddy," or he calls him old pal. And then you see Linus. He's like, you see him. He looks at the phone. He's like, "Cannonball!" Or he runs into it. He just causes a big giant mess.
Well, the other thing too is like, and again, it's only like 25, 30 minutes or whatever, depending if you got some commercials or what your cut is. But they go through a typical fall day. I mean, of course, you get to see them. You've got your open. You get to see Snoopy kind of helping out and goofing off, being the dog with Charlie Brown. And I think it's important that in a lot of these things they show these two together because when you have a dog and you have a relationship with it, there are just those things that occur. And I'm not that kind of guy that comes on here and wants to put down cats and say they're awful or anything like that. I'm not a cat guy. I don't hate them, but it's a different relationship that an owner has if you have a dog versus a cat. And both are smart in their own way, but they're just wired differently. And so it was kind of neat to see get suckered in because also fall, what does it mean? Football season, huge. Yeah. We know this. So it's kind of neat too that Charlie Brown has a stubborn streak in him that he just wants to do it, and he has to have his thing to look forward to be able to do successfully one day. And I like how Lucy's just always one step ahead. So like we said before, with them acting like adults, they all have their kind of special relationships, and whenever they have Thanksgiving or Christmas or this or a summer or Valentine's Day, you basically get to see how those relationships are tested. And that's, I think, the beauty of Peanuts is that, and this sounds so stupid saying it, but it's one of the few examples I think that's really true, is that it's so simple and it's so effective, but that's what makes it memorable. We know who these characters are. They don't change. They
No,
don't necessarily evolve since even the comic strip. Maybe some polishing touches, but they are who they are and they're fixed. So when you go back and you read them or you watch them when you're older, you go, oh, it reminds me when I was a kid or when I saw it, or I haven't really seen this one a lot before. Like
yeah,
it's Arbor Day or Bon Voyage, Charlie Brown or whatever.
Race for Your
Um,
Life.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, and there was in the '80s even a show where they put out some stuff there too, and I'm not that familiar with them. They weren't these topical
There's like
holiday type
50 or
things.
something, or plus, or more, or something like that, of just Charlie Brown's, just like episodes, just like movies they put out, little skits.
Well, and here's the thing about it too. One of the things I think that makes it attractive, besides being simple and rewatchable, is that even though some of these characters, when we look at them as adults, we may not think they're 100% likable. We understand them. It's still kind of fun to watch them because they seem pretty innocent. They don't seem like they have
No, it's
that evil mean streak. Like I'm going to better myself by putting you down. It's more of the I'm going to test your boundaries and your limits of your personality because that's what people do. That's
And
how you learn to engage.
I like the fact they said like Lucy would would basically tease Charlie Brown throughout this, and then when it came to dying for bombing for apples, she went to goes like, fine, I'll go do it. She's gonna show him how to do it. She puts her mouth in there and she pulls an apple. On the other side is Snoopy on the apple. She's like, oh, my lips touch dog lips, gross. There was karma. It's like, for her being a jerk, I love how Snoopy would get her back, because you saw Snoopy when he came in the house. He kind of sneaked around, he slid down.
Yep.
And then he looked at it. He's like, oh, okay. He jumps in. Like I said, it's innocent humor. It's not like vulgar or anything like that.
Certainly not sexual.
No, at all. And the music through all this is just great.
The music, yeah, I want to talk about that too, because that's one thing that I always try to bring up when we talk about these specials is that the group did a kind of a jazzy score. And so when you had a lot of music in the turn of the century, big band sounds and all that, of course, rock and roll was starting to just take over the airwaves in the 50s, let's say. So this is the 60s. You had at the time a big divergence in music and what was readily available, in the sense that you had your people that grew up on classic big band sounds, instrumentality, not necessarily a lot
rock,
of vocals.
and jazz, folk.
And then all of a sudden you get rock and roll coming up, and then so you had your two kinds of musicians. You had your manufactured product, which still exists today, where you take somebody like Elvis that might have an incredible voice, some people would say, and charisma, but you give them all the songs from everybody else and have them do it, and have all the people play the instruments behind them, make a lot of money. And it's not to say it's not enjoyable, but even people like Frank Sinatra didn't really want to cross over because they felt like the standards and the old classic stuff was the way to go. And if you were a serious musician, you tried to go up in your music ability. So the jazz people were considered the best, even though they were a bit obscure. So it was interesting that even though there was this divide, popular music became generally rock and roll, and then there's derivatives, as we know today, that Peanuts stuck with the jazzy thing because it may not work for everybody. It may just be music in the background. People just think, oh, it's scored or whatever. But having an orchestral score, if you go back and listen to old movies and TVs, it's beautiful. It can really add to it. But I think it adds an element of class to Charlie Brown, even though it's a kid's thing. But to go back to your original point, you can watch this as an adult. And I think having that in there rather than something else that would be dated makes it work. And without it, it would not be nearly as good.
I admit I'm not really the biggest Charlie Brown fan, because I've not seen all of them. I've only seen a few, so I have my favorites, which is I've always been the Charlie Brown Christmas one. Because growing up I had the claymation stuff too, the Woodstock claymation. So I watched Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and then the Charlie Brown would come on, and then you had the Garfield Thanksgiving stuff.
Right.
So that was like early '90s. I was watching some of this stuff. They're airing on TV. So. And I was like that. So whenever I see Snoopy stuff, I'm like, hey, do you want to watch it? It's like, I'm not really in the mood to watch it. But when you get close to these holiday stuff, like you said, like Christmas or Thanksgiving stuff, and if it happens to be on TV, you see it there, sadly, Snoopy will never be on TV anymore. It's only on Apple. Thanks, guys. But yeah, it's watching it as a family really helps too. Like I said, I just went out and we decided, well, let's do something like what screams more Halloween, what's more acceptable that everybody loves. People come out, oh, horror movies. No, Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown, I think, is more popular than people give it credit for. And like I said, I went out to Walmart earlier today, and I picked it up because like I wanted to get the holiday special. This is only DVD, and I was like $20. I was like, what? DVD $20, but it's 3 movies plus you get all the different specials on the back here for all of them. So
oh yeah.
So it's like you're getting a 3-movie collection. So then it dawned on me, oh, that's why it's that much. But because Blu-rays are usually like expensive, you're paying $30-$40. So this is a good way. Go to Walmart. They always have these out during the holiday stuff, and you can just spend the $20 because unless you're gonna pay through Apple service trying to find them, or if you're lucky, you go to the thrift store, you might come across an old VHS. But if you don't have a VHS player,
Well, Apple TV, the movie that came out in 2000, I think it was 15, I thought was done very well. I was concerned, but I think they treated the IP with care. I think the Schultz family somehow was involved in making sure that a lot of liberties weren't necessarily taken with it, like we see with, like, say, Nancy Drew and everything else that's out there today. The reimaging process, that's our current form of writing. To me, when you talk about Apple, they obviously knew that it was something that if they could produce it, I think they got some great IP. But unfortunately, a lot of people, with Apple, always great at starting stuff, but never really finishing it. And while it's there, they did do recently a season of some Snoopy episodes, and I watched it last year, and it wasn't bad. It's kind of about them learning how to be an astronaut and stuff, and it felt like it captured the spirit.
So it's still had the same kind of humor stuff, subtle humor.
Exactly. It did feel like you were watching it, and I felt a little cautious because being older, I thought, well, sometimes the first few episodes turn to be good, like we say of a lot of things, but then once you get the middle, it goes off the rails, and I don't think that it did. So whoever they've gotten to produce that, I would not be opposed to seeing another movie or another set of that.
Well, that was always a thing, So whenever they did this for the Charlie Brown stuff, it was always like there's a moral story to you can get from it. They don't really, look at the Christmas one. Christmas one has the Lord's Prayer and all that stuff in there, and so like that stuff they don't see on TV anymore, and a lot of places do not. They don't you can't say Merry Christmas anymore because the word Christ is in Christmas.
Well, you can.
So,
I mean, that's just how it is.
You can. I'm just saying that they're really encouraging stores for employees not to say it because you may offend someone by saying that. I'm like, well, so you can't say Merry Christmas. What about people who celebrate Kwanzaa? They never get to say. No one says Happy Kwanzaa to them. They politicize something that was so simple, that didn't offend anybody. It's just something that's crazy people being crazy people.
Well, it's just the way it goes. But I mean,
like this, it's a holiday collection.
Yeah. Well, and one of the last things I'll say here is that you'd mentioned before about being simpler. When everybody would sit around and watch the stuff together, it became like a thing to do every year, and so these very powerful forces of routine and being passed down from one generation to another are extremely powerful, and it may take a year or two to break that, but then that's what happens. So when we talk about how Roger Ebert at the movies with Gene Siskel and whatever incarnation there shows at the time, you could go from the late 70s, early 80s for a very long time watching them review films, and things would get released on a Friday. You got in this routine. Same thing with Sunday and football. And so with Charlie Brown, like a lot of things, you would watch a special, but you would watch it together as a family. You would never, growing up, although a lot of households are starting to do it by the 70s, you for the most part never had TV on when you were eating dinner. You sat around and ate. But I mean, things are different these days, and a lot of things have instant access. So you lose the power of like things that benefit from it, like Snoopy, and even football today is, even though it's still king on TV, it's nowhere near as popular as it was. Same thing with other major sports, despite the massive contracts and all that too. And to your point, going to Christmas again, it's a similar thing, and they're kind of, it just doesn't have that punch that it used to. But when we were talking about, well, we've done all these horror films here on the Xtreme Movie Show, and I thought, well, you know what? Let's review something simple that anybody can watch, anybody can have opinion. And I've yet to meet one person in my entire life that says, I don't like Peanuts. Now there might be someone to go, it's okay. It wasn't my thing. I preferred this or that. But
Yep.
for me, Peanuts just because it was consistent, because you knew the characters, because they dealt with real life issues, not topical issues, allows it to be timeless and not so dated, that I think makes it one of the best comic strips of all time. And I know that you guys will cover comic stuff a lot more. We have Eric Breen here in channel right now talk about stuff. He's a big watcher and listener. The whole thing with comics is seeing a weekly strip and then the Sunday one would be in color and the rest were black
Oh
and
yeah,
white. That was a big deal, you know?
I used to grow up getting the paper stuff. You know, I was probably one of the last generations that have comic strips and like funny in the paper and stuff, because everything's now online now. You know, print is dead, as they say.
Well, one thing I'll mention here, and then we'll call it a night here after our final thoughts, is I do remember in the 90s, they would have these collections and they started to become popular when graphic novels actually started to become a thing, not just comic books.
Yeah.
That Calvin and Hobbes, which is my second favorite strip of all time. I was a big Bloom County fan, and I did like some other ones too. The Far Side was incredible, of course.
Yep.
But Peanuts to me is like number one. Calvin and Hobbes is almost a number two. I mean, I could almost flip them. They would have where you would have all the collections all in color, like all the Calvin and Hobbes strips, and they would put them in order, like from this date to that. There's like, I don't know, 5, 6 books, let's say. And
Oh yeah, they did that.
Tabletop books or whatever you want to call them, the softbacks. And I don't know if they've done them with Charlie Brown. I could have sworn they did because, you know, Eric's mentioning in chat about we had a bunch of his books. I swore that when I was a kid, I would get from Scholastic or whoever the Charlie Brown ones, and they would have the strips, and it would be like 1950, you know,
Yeah.
June or whenever it
That was-
debuted, and it would just go through those couple years, and so you could get them like that and go in order. And I think reading them like that definitely helps get into you, because if you go through all of them, then when you sit down and you say, well, I'm not going to read them anymore, I'm just going to watch the stuff, it's just going to be in your brain more.
Yeah, my sister was really into the Peanuts, but she also liked the Garfield's comic strips. So they actually would make those books for the Garfield, and it had like several volumes, and it was always the comic book strips in black and white. And sometimes, and they said they started making color versions of them too. They probably don't do it anymore, but like, I don't know if I still have it or not, but that was cool, you know, because a lot of kids don't have experience anymore. Waking up Sunday morning, you know, and after church, reading the paper, the funnies.
Yep.
That's gone. It's sadly, you know, but that's where I discovered a lot of different comic strips on that. You know, they had Spider-Man stuff. They had Hagar the Horrible. Foxtrot was later on, but no. But the Peanuts was always the big thing. That was always the top one. And they had Ziggy. You had all these different comic strips. So it's great to see that they still are you're able to get the Charlie Brown stuff on DVD and stuff. Because I always figured like, oh, once it hits DVD, it's gone. Everything's gonna be everything that's on VHS. It's not as popping. So, and that my fear is that Charlie Brown is only available through Apple. So if you don't have Apple, a lot of kids may not experience, you know, the Charlie Brown stuff unless their parents were a fan of it too. And then like it's just gonna phase out. Because the great thing about having it on TV and public access TV for, you know, ABC, you can at least watch it every year and you got exposed to it. Now it's behind a paywall.
It is, and I think, you know, we mentioned before here on a higher level, I do believe there's a lot more consolidation to come with some of the main things. AT&T's stocks tanking, they're spinning off their stuff there too. I think they are going to merge with somebody, you know, Discovery, I believe it is. They're going to have a ton of content. I think it's still possible Apple may scoop up some company to get a bit more content so they can do it. Because I will tell you this, even though Apple TV's behind a paywall like everything else, we've talked about how Disney just has people that have been brainwashed for generations to love everything Disney, no matter what the quality of it is. And I am not one of them, despite Near the Mouse. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from people with Disney TV is that they've seen everything, they don't have a lot, and because, you know, they're not like Netflix level with just throwing out tons of crap there, that people are like, well, I've kind of seen everything now. And the thing with Apple is they have almost no shows. Now, several of the shows that are on Apple that I've seen, I've liked. I've talked about how I thought Servant was great. I think the Peanuts one was done well. They did a reboot of Amazing Stories. I enjoyed Home Before Dark, except for the second season got really, how do I say it, currently political with things. And they have several things there too that I'm not going to say I've watched them all, but it seems like they're going for definitely trying to have a lot of different types of things, and they're seeing what's going to stick. And it seems like the property that they put on there, they put a lot of effort into trying to come after a specific niche audience. Like there's not a lot of crossover, like Ted Lasso's on Apple, I think, and
Yeah.
that's huge. People love it and everything too. But they have other animated stuff. Snoopy in Space is the show that I was talking about. The second season has not come on there, but they have some other things too. I might have to check the Snoopy show. I don't think I saw that.
You know what'd be really cool? They do this for all the other TV series. You get the big giant box set. I want the giant box of all the Charlie Brown. Like, you know, I want the James Bond box sets. I want just all the Charlie Brown stuff.
Yeah, and
Like
the issue with these box sets is you know, you have to deal with rights.
Rights. Yeah, I know it sucks. You know, it's
And
just
so you don't know if some of that stuff's going to get edited, and I wouldn't think that the Charlie Brown stuff would be, but you don't know. So I'm sure that they've existed because Charlie Brown's super popular on VHS and especially DVD. You had to watch them during the holidays. It put you in the holiday mood.
Charles Schultz knew how to, like, you know, just capture everything and get kids involved, and then him putting in the jazz music too. So like make, you know, maybe get kids. They get Schroeder always playing like the piano, you know, and stuff. So there's always, he included everybody. Like there was a kid, the poor kid, Pigpen was always in there, so included that. There's always the one girl. They're basically on little stereotypes about people of certain living standards as far as people. Lucy always came off spoiled, you know, the know-it-all. She's the know-it-all, and then like Charlie Brown was just like the normal guy. He's just, I just want to have fun, man. And I'm getting tired of getting picked on because, you know, he had his dog, you know, and he had his buddy Lionel, Linus, who basically was a kid. We knew kids, you know.
Bro. Yeah.
We knew kids that had safety blankets, protective blankets. They never want to get rid of them.
But he made it an asset, not a crutch.
Yeah. No,
you know, and he was younger. And Charlie Brown just vocalized, you know, any of the thoughts that we might have had growing up too, where the other characters didn't. That's why it should be about him.
And what's the Lionel though? Come Lionel, freaking Thundercats. Linus has the blanket, and he's like, and Lucy's like, "How are you gonna mail it? You're not even told to reach it." He's like, he does the Indiana Jones whip and then pulls it down the door, and then he throws the letter, and it floats around, and then finally goes in. And they let go, and then he kind of looks at her and walks away. She's angry. Like I do like that it's just like that. The humor in this is just, you know, it's just enough where everyone can love it. You know, yes, some of it is adult humor, and I'm reinforced again. When I say adult humor, I don't mean mature, like, you know, it's disgusting, perverted humor. This is just when they use some of the bigger words. And what's great about this is every year you watch it, you get older, you learn more stuff. You go back and like, and then you notice like, oh, I didn't notice that from last time I watched it. So every year you kind of learn something new. It's a new experience for you as you watch it over and over. And then what's cool about like these movies, when you watch it with your kids, you can watch them see how your kids, what they pick up, what they don't pick up, and you just talk that it's a family friendly. Just I guess you want to call it.
It's wholesome.
Yeah, wholesome. What's it called? Franchise or something, I guess. Franchise.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's about one of the most wholesome products that's out there. I know people used to bag on like the Waltons when everybody would say goodnight back in the 70s. That was a show back that was super popular and everything. But you go back to like Leave It to Beaver, even though it had a laugh track in there, it captured a lot of what was going on at the time, and everyone thought of her as like America's mom. And in the 80s, Cosby of all people was America's dad because he would have conversations with Theo, his son, and you know.
I always knew him as the pudding guy. I never watched the Cosby
Show.
the
Pudding Pops guy. That's the other thing too. You got that for you. Yeah.
Jello.
But there was something always like, again, about Charlie Brown that just remains timeless and wholesome. And I'm really glad that he exists, because without it, it's like, well, God, what's the most wholesome, childlike, innocent thing that you can latch onto as an adult and not feel guilty about it? And
like I said,
still argue that it's great content. And
I still go back I still like Charlie Brown, and I still go to Garfield stuff. Garfield is just one of those things. It's you know, you still learn valuable lessons from Garfield, not as much as you would from Charlie Brown and the Peanut Gang.
Well, let's finish up here with our final thoughts there too. Like I say, I was surprised because I didn't realize this is only like your second or third watch ever of this too. I know you've seen some of the other stuff a bit more, but generally speaking, what final thoughts do you have here on It's a Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown?
Overall, I think it's a really good movie. It's a lot better than what I originally thought it was going to be. Like if I'm at a movie, you can like, hey, do you want to watch this? And like, no, that's okay. You kind of write it off. So when I actually sat down and watched this is I'd say this is probably a 9 out of 10. You know, if not even a 10. It's I mean 10 is I give it a 9 because it's not long enough. I went more.
I think it's just long enough.
It's only like 25 minutes though, which is it just feels kind of
you'd only have 5 minutes of commercials.
Yeah.
And as opposed to it would be only 21 minutes now, maybe, or even 18 with 8 to 12 minutes of commercials in today's time for half-hour shows.
Yeah.
So meaty by 1960 standards.
Yeah, I said overall the humor in this, the wholesomeness, just the music, the voice acting, just the scenery, everything, the attention to detail. It's what you expect from a high quality stuff, because someone who actually cares about what they're putting out, versus today where you kind of get like, oh, okay, I'll just slap this together, and it's more about political message than it is about actually creating a story that people can enjoy.
Yeah. This is one of the better ones for Charlie Brown. I mean, I like a lot of the other ones too, but I think if you had to pick just a few of them out of the entire catalog, especially even like the show in the 80s or the one here that they've redone, this would be near the top list. The music's great, the animation's great, it's got just enough scenes in it. To me, it's not Halloween until you watch it, really.
Yeah.
Or Halloween 3 if you're Aaron Brain. Okay, 5 more days till Halloween, Silver Shamrock. On that note, gentlemen, thank you for listening here to It's a Great Pumpkin.
And if you're looking for a witch, the only one is Lucy in this one.
Well, Halloween 3 is the season of the witch.
Lucy.
Have a good night, everybody. Check out our Facebook page where we're posting links up there too. If you got any particular ones that you'd like us to review movie-wise or TV things, let us know. We've got a few that we're getting done now that we're winding down Halloween. We now get to focus on Thanksgiving going into Christmas. So maybe somebody wants to see Thanksgiving. Maybe somebody wants to see something else. Let us know. We'll make sure to get to it. For RTV, everybody involved here at the Xtreme Movie Show, I'm your host, Rob. Have a good night. And as always, stay extreme.
Remember, this is at Target, Walmart right now. Collection, get it.
Yeah. Good night.
Good night, guys.